when we look at the analysis provided in the budget, and also when we experience the day-to-day reality in Guyana, we will see that Guyana is in a very fortunate position when compared to economies and also countries with similar socio-economic standing within the Caribbean and outside of the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, we in Guyana are very fortunate, the people of Guyana are very fortunate to have a government and certainly to have policies, programs and projects in place whereby we can see an enlargement, an expansion, an increase in spending in our people, and at the same time a reduction in taxation. Nowhere else, Mr. Speaker, is this taking place across the world. No, there's no other economy whereby people are seeing more investments being made in them and there's less taxation. In fact, there's a reduction in taxation. Mr. Speaker, also in 2011, we've seen that the government has been able to increase its investment in all sectors, focusing on people's development and at the same time being able to have our debt at a manageable and at a sustainable level. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if we look at the impact of the global fuel, food, and just recently, and many countries are still going through that, the global economic crisis, we will see that Guyana has certainly fared well. Guyana has certainly come out well, and that is because of the sound and prudent management and leadership of this country by President Jagdeo and the PPP civic government. Mr. Speaker, I don't have to contrive any story or paint any picture that is unreal. If we look at the International Monetary Fund assessment report that was released on March the 10th last year, if you look at the 2010 World Bank analysis of Latin America and the Caribbean, and in fact we will see that Guyana has in fact exceeded many other countries and countries of likewise status economically and even socially in many regards. And all of us ought to be proud of that. That is not only to the credit of the PPP Civic, it is to the credit of the people of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, also last year, we were one of 3 countries within the Latin America and the Caribbean region to have achieved the Millennium Development Goal #1, that is to halve poverty and reduce hunger. We were 1 in 3 in this entire region. Doesn't that tell us about good management? Does it not speak to the progress we've made, Latin America and the Caribbean? Mr. Speaker, if we look around, and we don't even have to use the government statistics. Just yesterday in the newspaper, over the weekend, Banks DIH had its AGM. And Banks DIH, we saw across all the headlines and on the television about the billions of dollars in profit and the reserve and also the viability of the company. Before that, Mr. Speaker, we also saw DDL. Before that, Mr. Speaker, we saw Republic Bank. And if you speak to the principals of Republic Bank based in Trinidad, they will tell you that Guyana is the only group in which they would have made 5 years of consecutive profits. 5 years of consecutive profit throughout the region. Doesn't that tell us about progress? Doesn't that tell us about economic dynamism in our country? And those are facts you cannot change. Mr. Speaker, all of us today must be proud of where we are and where we're going. All Guyana. All of us must be proud of that. Because if we look from whence we came, few countries, Mr. Speaker, very few countries was able to make that rapid progress, in such a short time that we're able to transform this country. We're able to transform this country at a rapid pace. Mr. Speaker, today, Guyana, we not only stand as what the IDB in the early 2000s described us as a shining light, but also today, increasingly, we are recognized as a global player, notwithstanding our size of our economy and also of our population. A global player, take for instance leadership in climate change. Take for instance our leadership in advocating the issues for developing countries and ensuring that developing countries such as ours have a fair share. And I wish to remind this National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, that Guyana's projection is in fact ahead of what the World Bank is projecting for the entire region at 3.3%. And that again, Mr. Speaker, points to where we are going. It points to the progress, and it points to this country making rapid economic and social development for all our people. Mr. Speaker, we heard in some of the interventions earlier that the government is spending huge amount of resources, and in fact, one of the honorable members described this as a massive budget for massive corruption. Well, Mr. Speaker, if spending $4.5 billion in our elderly is considered corruption, Mr. Speaker, if we spend $500 million for the school feeding program, is that considered corruption? Mr. Speaker, if spending close to $9.1 million in taking care of some of the issues of our farmers, is that corruption? If spending $5.1 billion also in housing and water, is that corruption? And if we're spending close to $25 billion in continuing to address the advancement of our education sector, is that considered corruption? Well, Mr. Speaker, it clearly points out that the often and the repeated line of the opposition, it has no answer, it has no alternative. And what it seeks to do, every intervention, every program, every progress that we make, the opposition seeks to put corruption as a label. Well, Mr. Speaker, the people of Guyana who are benefiting from these programs, the people of Guyana who are benefiting from these programs are the ones who will judge, and they have, on many occasions, they have judged us on consecutive elections that this fabrication of widespread corruption, Mr. Speaker, is merely a fabrication. Mr. Speaker, we talk about the Auditor General's report. I don't have to go and quote a former Auditor General who may have issues or a bee in his bonnet. I don't have to go and quote that. You can just have to look at the consecutive. All you have to do is look at the consecutive reports presented by the Auditor General. And any analysis and any assessment of that report will point out that year after year, the level of accountability, the level of public accountability and transparency is increasing. And that points to good stewardship, and it points to a commitment in dealing with corruption. The government's commitment in this regard is solidified in the fact that not only did the government agree to adhere to the World Bank safeguards, but under this particular arrangement, the government is adding on the IDB safeguards. So in managing the Guyana Red Investment Funds and the $250 million US dollars that will come from Norway, it will have to go through 2 levels, in fact 3 levels, in terms of ensuring that we have safeguards and proper utilization of the resources. That shows how acutely aware we are in insisting and ensuring that the resources coming to the people are used, managed, and utilized in a very transparent way. Mr. Speaker, I wish to refer to the Rainforest Alliance program that has just completed the verification of the process related to the enabling activities for Guyana-Norway REDD+ agreement. And this report was released on January the 6th. And this is what the Rainforest Alliance had to say about the work done regarding this, because it seems as if every progress, every good initiative for the people of Guyana, there is an attempt to discredit. There is an attempt to misrepresent. But I don't want, you don't have to use my analysis. You don't have to use what we are saying. Let us go to the internationally reputable forum that the Norwegians have hired. And this is what they've said just over 14 days ago. The following are the principal findings of the Rainforest Alliance verification audit of enabling activities as outlined by the joint concept note between the government of Norway and the government of Guyana, page 4. And then I go down, Mr. Speaker. First of all, on the strategic framework, this is what the Rainforest Alliance assessors had to say, that a framework is in place and is being implemented. And then they went on to put some more details on that. Mr. Speaker, the issue in terms of investments, and we talk about job creation in agriculture and outside of agriculture. And there was the observation made that the government is going about increasing the debt and putting burden on future generations. What are the facts, Mr. Speaker? The facts are that when we came into office, we were spending 90% of our revenue on servicing the external debt. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are only spending 13%. Isn't that prudent management? Isn't that careful consideration of our debt management? And Mr. Speaker, we are a very lawful government. And whatever we do are in conformity of the law. And our debt management approach is also guided by the External Debt Act that we have, that was passed by this National Assembly. All are consistent. So for anyone to suggest that the government is being irresponsible in increasing the debt and making it unmanageable and also burdening future generation is far, far from the fact. Because on one hand, we hear that the government needs to do more to create value added. That we need to do more value added in agriculture and other sectors, mining, in forestry, looking at other sectors of the economy. We also hear that we need to increase the rate of investment. But how are we going to do that if we do not make investments in infrastructure? How are we going to do that if we do not facilitate the means through which people can invest and create economic activities? And we only can do that by working with our partners. And the international agencies, Mr. Speaker, as all of us know, the international agencies are very strict, and they insist that people conform to good governance. They conform to the highest, they've conformed to the highest level of financial prudent management. And we have satisfied those international criteria. The fact that we have a government that is willing to provide resources in terms of our stewardship of management of our forestry resources and to support economic development activities. The fact that we have support from the World Bank, the IDB, and other donor agencies speaks to the fact, Mr. Speaker, about their satisfaction in the level of management, in the level of progress that we have made in the country. But if we look, Mr. Speaker, at the budget in terms of taking care of our people's need, because this budget can be described as a people's budget, because the investments that we are making are in our people's welfare and our people's development. It is a people's budget. And every single item, when we consider the estimates, we will see every single item, every single heading, the expenditures that we make are about improving the welfare, the lot of all our people.